Morning.
Morning.
Hope you folks, I only have a couple minutes of comments to make, but I'm definitely not a practiced public speaker, so cut me some slack. Thanks everyone for being here with us today. My name is Gil Canaveri. I'm a Navy veteran and a retired Pennsylvania State Trooper. I grew up less than 10 miles from here in a little town called Peckville. Some of you may have heard of it.
All right.
There we go, Peckville. And I'm proud to be back today to stand in support of Senator Bob Casey because he's always had the backs of veterans. Senator Casey deeply respects our veterans and law enforcement officers and is fighting every day to deliver for us. Senator Casey is helping to ensure that veterans receive the recognition that we deserve, that our families are looked after, and that we have access to the benefits that we earn through our service. Senator Casey stands in stark contrast to Republicans, including his opponent, David McCormack. After his separation from the military, McCormack frequently put his bottom line ahead of Pennsylvanians, even his own country, so he could make millions of dollars. As the CEO of the largest hedge fund in the world, McCormack invested millions in blacklisted Chinese companies producing stealth bombers, fighter jets, and other types of aircraft for China's military. In fact, over time, McCormack increased his investments in China by over 100,000%. He may have been able to line his pockets, but his investments have come at a real cost to our national security. He helped shovel millions of dollars into an American adversary, jeopardizing that national security. Over the last 15 years, McCormack has only worried about himself, while Senator Casey has always been committed to supporting veterans.
That is cool.
And I know that together, come November, we can, and we will, reject David McCormack and send Senator Casey back to the Senate. So now it's my pleasure to introduce a Marine Corps veteran and the political director of VoteVets, Travis Taslar.
All right, thank you. Hi, good morning. I was expecting a Marine Corps joke from him, but we didn't get one. My name is Travis. I'm with VoteVets, and I'm here to talk to you a little bit today about the fentanyl crisis that is devastating American communities and Pennsylvania communities. At the same time, it's devastating veteran communities as well. As a civilian, I've had at least two of my guys that have overdosed and died since I've been a civilian. So when I heard about Dave McCormack's investments, I was pretty incensed by it. As a CEO of the world's largest hedge fund, David McCormack invested in the biggest fentanyl producer in China, the source of the vast majority of fentanyl that Mexican drug cartels are smuggling into this country. He led Bridgewater Associates, the world's largest hedge fund, while it invested nearly $1.7 million in China's largest fentanyl producer. That same year, unsurprisingly, he profited millions from this investment, while fentanyl killed more than 4,000 Pennsylvanians, and fentanyl seizures in Pennsylvania skyrocketed. He didn't stop there. He doubled down. Later, Dave McCormack came out against securing the border and combating illegal fentanyl trafficking, publicly opposing historic bipartisan legislation to secure the border and combat fentanyl trafficking. The bill included the Fend Off Fentanyl Act, co-sponsored by Senator Bob Casey, which will crack down on fentanyl trafficking that has devastated Pennsylvania communities. We know that Senator Bob Casey is running for re-election today, but his commitment to veterans didn't start today. It didn't start yesterday. He's been a steadfast partner to our community for decades, and a lot of people here know that. He's worked across the aisle to get veterans health care, to get them benefits, pay, and respect. That's why 2 years ago, when Bob Casey was trying to pass the PACT Act and Republicans tried to kill it, last minute, they tried to kill it. And Bob Casey stepped up, went into action, and a few weeks later, they got the PACT Act passed. That expands you get veterans that have been exposed to Agent Orange, into burn pits, to toxins that can give you asthma and that can lead to cancer. And since this legislation, we've had almost 1 million nationally veterans who are getting benefits. Some who wouldn't have benefits, who are laying in a hospital bed today and who otherwise wouldn't have benefits. Because of this effort, more than 27,000 Pennsylvania veterans have received help, and more than 100,000 are eligible. And we're going to continue to push those 100,000 to get on the rolls. He's also successfully fought to include provisions in the bill to help improve recruitment and retention of healthcare professionals at rural Veterans Affairs facilities. When Republicans say that they support veterans, do not believe them. Do not believe them. They have not. They do not have the track record that the Democrats have, and they especially do not have the track record that Bob Casey has. I want to bring up the next speaker, Patrick Murphy, and let him introduce himself. And before we introduce the senator, Patrick.
Thanks, Travis. It's great to be back here. It's great to be back home. I used to work at Montage Mountain when I was a student at King's College. And I actually earned, there you go, King's College, there you go. But I actually earned my Army commission through Army ROTC from the University of Scranton because we didn't have a program. So it is great to be back here. And Travis, I think they allowed me to, Senator said it's okay, I could bust chops about you being a Marine. Everyone understands what Marine stands for. Muscles are required, intelligence not essential. Army stands for aren't ready to be Marine yet. So this is it's like, all right, so like I'm bipartisan, but and Gil, thank you for your service, not just in the Navy, Gil, but your incredible service as a state trooper here in Pennsylvania and keeping our families safe, Gil. So thank you so much. And I know we have a lot of dignitaries here, a lot of our brother and sister veterans, people like Navy Commander Chris Carney, former U.S. Congressman. Chris and your family, thank you so much for your service. I see we have Staff Sergeant Erica Webster coming up from Chester County. Thanks, Erica, for being here. Dave Demas from the AFGE, the American Federation of Government Employees. That's the majority of the VA workers, that union that's here. Dave, thanks for your leadership, brother. Appreciate you being here. The reason why we're here is because Bob Casey is a workhorse for our brothers and sister veterans and not a show horse. We're here because Bob Casey has delivered time and time again for our brothers and sister veterans. Right now in colleges and universities across America, there are 800,000 young Americans utilizing the post-9/11 GI Bill. That's the bill that Bob Casey worked on when he first got to the Senate. When I was in the House and you were in the Senate, Chris Carney and I partnered with you. You delivered it and it continues to deliver every single day for our veterans. Two years ago, the Senate passed and the House passed and President Biden signed into law the PACT Act. The PACT Act, because of Bob Casey, 1 million veterans just signed up on the PACT Act. 27,000 veterans in Pennsylvania now have health care because of Bob Casey and the PACT Act. That is what a workhorse does. And it's a contrast between a show horse of his opponent. His opponent, who has not told the truth in his ads. You heard Gil and Travis talk about it. We lost 4,700 Pennsylvanians to fentanyl in 2022. That was the last year he was a CEO of that company that invested $1.7 million to a company called Human Well Health. Chinese company that does 90% of the fentanyl produced is from that company in China. Not in the United States, in China. That kills our fellow Pennsylvanians and fellow Americans across this country. That is not what we're taught in the military. We're taught about taking care of our brothers and sisters, the guy or gal on your left and your right. You take that oath to support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. That you live your life with honor and integrity. Dave McCormack made millions and tens of millions of dollars, and that's great for him. For him to turn around and question the integrity and the demonstrated leadership of Bob Casey, and when Bob Casey calls him out for the truth, that's not right. That's not what our brother and sister veterans do. And that's why we're here today, to set the record straight between a workhorse and Bob Casey and a show horse with his opponent, who talks the talk but does not walk the walk. When I was earning my commission back in 1996, at the University of Scranton, we had a t-shirt, Army ROTC, but in the back it said, lead, follow, or get out of the way. Bob Casey has led. Bob Casey has delivered, and we need Bob Casey's voice in the U.S. Senate for our brothers and sisters to continue the march to make this country the best country in the world. God bless all of you. Senator Bob Casey.
Patrick, thank you. Well, thanks very much, everyone. And I'm honored you're here today to talk about critically important issues. I want to start with gratitude for each of you for taking the time to be here and for taking time out of your day to be here. You could be other places today, but you're participating in American democracy by participating in our campaign, and I think in a larger sense, you're here because you love your country. You love our country, and you're concerned about the direction we could take if we make the wrong decisions between now and November. I want to extend that gratitude, of course, to the preceding three speakers, Congressman Patrick Murphy and Gil and Travis, for their time here today. They could be doing other things, but they've dedicated their lives continuing to serve in a real sense by staying involved in politics all across our Commonwealth and really by extension across the country. But we're also, of course, grateful on a day like today for their service. I'm not sure it's ever been said better than my father when he was taking the oath of office way back in 1991. It was the eve of the war in Iraq, or I should say the Gulf War, the first Gulf War, and he stood in front of the people of our state, and he was worried, as we all were, about what was going to happen the next day. January of 1991, our fighting men and women were going to battle against Saddam Hussein's vaunted Republican Guard, considered one of the greatest fighting forces in the world. So we were expecting, and thankfully did not endure, heavy casualties. But he said this, he said about our veterans, and by extension our military families, he said, we pray for those who are going into battle. So we pray for them, but we also pray for ourselves that we may be worthy of their valor. And that statement he made about those who serve us should be the source of inspiration today. If you are a legislator, or if you seek to be a legislator, a member of the United States Congress, House or Senate, or frankly any legislature, but especially at the national level, you should be judged by your record, how you vote, not the speeches you give, not the great one-liners you come up with, and not the campaigns you run. You should be judged by how you vote. And when it comes to the PACT Act, as Congressman Murphy said, that's legislation that now has benefited more than 1 million American veterans, over 1 million. In fact, I've seen numbers as high as more than 1.2 million American veterans. And as Patrick said, well above 27,000 here in Pennsylvania. We got another 100,000 to go. But that was not something that happened by magic. It happened by hard work. And frankly, thankfully, it was bipartisan. But it ran into in the Senate, a huge Republican roadblock at the end. We had to fight through that roadblock. And that didn't happen just because senators were standing up. Veterans were standing up, giving up their time, giving up themselves, coming to Washington over and over again, not just for a day or two, not just for weeks at a time, month after month, and even some of them year after year after year, working together in common purpose with Democrats and Republicans to get that done. And I'm damn glad that I voted for the PACT Act. It was the right thing to do for our veterans. It was long, long overdue, and it was damn close to being thwarted by some people on the right. But we defeated them, and we voted the right way. When we voted that way, we proved again, I did and others who voted for it, that on that day, on that vote, we were worthy of the valor of our military families as well as our veterans. But there's more than that. There's more than that. As a member of Congress, House or Senate, Patrick can tell you this, Chris Carney can tell you this, you have a chance to vote on appropriation bills. What are in the annual appropriation bills? VA health care. So don't tell me, if you're a member of Congress, that you support veterans and you support our national security and you're a great patriot, if you vote against VA health care and the appropriations for VA health care, you're not worthy of the valor of our veterans and our military fighting men and women and their families if you're voting against funding for VA health care. And I've got a strong record on that as well, year after year, voting to support the appropriations. And if you're voting to cut the VA, or cut especially VA health care, you are not worthy of the valor of those who serve us. And I have been. And my opponent, who's going to talk a good game in this campaign about his record as a veteran, and we should commend and salute that record. But the other part of his record is a lot more recent. The record is a hedge fund manager, not just a big hedge fund, the largest hedge fund in the world. Why do you think he's worth several $100 million? In fact, I want to thank VoteVets because that bus behind me is probably the only bus of its kind that I'll ever get on in this campaign. Because I don't have a bus like that. My opponent has a bus, I think it's even bigger than the VoteVets bus. But he's got a big bus because he's worth several $100 million. And you know who's coming in to prop up his campaign? Even though he has all that money, I don't know what so far he hasn't spent it, but we expect him to spend it in September and October. But you know who's propping him up now? The billionaires. In fact, one billionaire with one contribution gave his super PAC $10 million. Now, this isn't some super PAC that's in Washington that's coming in to help Republicans all across the country. He's got that too, by the way. This is a super PAC set up just for David McCormack, funded by out-of-state billionaires. So you got an out-of-state candidate being funded by out-of-state billionaires. Now, they're not just funding him because they got nothing else to do. Those billionaires, or those out-of-state billionaires, Wall Street guys, are funding his campaign, carrying 80% at last count of his advertising. Billionaires carrying his advertising with a $30 million super PAC because he's going to vote with them. He's already committed to vote with the Republican majority. I would call it a MAGA majority in the Senate to extend those billionaire and corporate tax cuts that they rammed through in 2017 to the detriment of the middle class, to the detriment of families that have to struggle to put food on the table. That's their plan. So if you want to know their economic plan, it's real simple. Other than rigging the courts for right-wing judges and justices. You know that record. But the other plan that David McCormack will vote for, because he's already told us this, will be to extend all of those billionaire and corporate tax breaks in 2025 in the most important tax bill of our lifetime. That's coming up in 2025. This election will settle what kind of a tax bill we're going to have. But he's going to vote for that. And guess what happens? When you vote for the billionaire tax cuts and you vote for the big corporate tax cuts, guess what gets crowded out? Investments in children, like the child tax credit. Guess what might get cut and crowded out? You guessed it, VA healthcare. Because when you give away all the money to the top, there's not much money left. And that's what they've proven over and over again. So if you want to jack up the debt once again in America, if you want to give away the store to big corporations and billionaires and make it harder for us to fund VA healthcare, harder to invest in the middle class and children and seniors, then you should go vote for the other side, because that's what they're doing. They're telling us what they're going to do. They're going to vote for a tax bill that will be worth more than $4 trillion of debt and deficit. That's what they're all about. So we're going to make it very clear that we're not going to support that in Pennsylvania. We're going to vote for a senator who's going to vote against the billionaires. I'm letting them know right now. They better keep attacking me, because I'm going to vote against those guys in those gross, obscene tax breaks that they got in 2017. And obviously, as was made reference to earlier, when you have someone running for the United States Senate who lied about where he lived, he's already lied to the people of our state about where he lived, he even lied about how he grew up. He said he came from nothing. He was targeted like some Horatio Alger or Abe Lincoln story. His father was a university president. He had a good life growing up. So did I. Why the hell would you lie about how you grew up? Why not just say, I was really blessed growing up, and then tell the rest of your story? But he didn't. He had to try to convince people that he grew up with nothing, and that's not true. And there are some other lies he's been telling along the way, including this most recent lie about his investment in a company that produced 90% of the fentanyl in China. 90%. He made that investment. He was the CEO of the company that made that investment. And he also invested in companies that were funding the Chinese military. So this is going to be a long 85 or so days. But by the end of this campaign, people are going to know the difference between what I stand for, what I've done with regard to our veterans, with regard to helping lift up our families, and where my opponent's been. He didn't vote in our state for 15 years, and I think it shows how out of touch he is about what's happening to the people of our state every day, and certainly what's happening to our veterans in Pennsylvania. So I'm honored to be with you, and I'm especially grateful that Travis and Gil and Patrick have served our nation so honorably and ably. And those, how many other veterans do we have here? Put your hand up if you're a veteran. Thank you. Thank you for being here. And thanks for your service. But we're going to make sure that people know by the end of this campaign who's on the side of veterans and who talks a good game. Who's got the votes, or who's just spewing a lot of hot air about where they stand. We're going to continue to point out those differences, and by the end of this campaign, it's not just going to be an interesting debate. We're going to win this. Thanks very much, everybody.
So, Senator, you talked about the importance of the PACT Act and wanting to get those benefits to the veterans who haven't accessed those yet. Can you talk a little bit about how you're doing that and how you connect veterans with the benefits that are available?
The most important thing is to make sure that veterans are aware that the PACT Act is in effect, and that many veterans have already benefited across the country. As we said earlier, the latest number I've seen in Pennsylvania, I think it's higher than this now, but from a few months ago, is more than 27,500 at that time, and that's going back a few months. So we have to make sure that veterans are aware, just like anything that happens within the federal government. Sometimes people are not aware of their benefits, so we got to keep talking about it. But I want to commend the VA for quickly implementing a system that allowed them to approve that many claims that quickly and to continue that process. As we said, we got 100,000, at least 100,000 more in Pennsylvania to go. And Patrick Murphy's knows this, he's lived it.
Yeah, I would just say a million of my brothers are veterans. I'm an Iraq veteran, Army, my brother's Air Force. When Senator Casey and his colleagues passed the PACT Act 2 years ago, a lot of folks said there's no way this is going to get passed. It passed, and now there's 1 million veterans that are thankful for him delivering time and time again. And it's not just the PACT Act. The GI Bill, the post-9/11 GI Bill, for our brothers and sisters, there's 800,000 veterans right now in colleges and universities across America going to school because of Bob Casey.
I have another question on veterans, and then can we transition to another topic?
Sure, yeah, as long as everyone is done with veterans.
Okay, fantastic. Well, thank you so much for being here today. Quick question for you, Senator Casey. Your opponent, as you mentioned, is a veteran.
Mm-hmm.
What would make you think that he wouldn't pass things like the PACT Act or support veterans in the way that you do?
Well, in 2022, especially at the very end, we had opposition throughout the development of that legislation, but at the very end it was almost blocked in the Senate. And I'll let him speak to whether or not he was using his voice in opposition to those who were blocking the bill. I'll let him speak to that. At that time, we needed every voice, not just members of Congress. We needed the voices of veterans, and thankfully we had those voices. I hope he was one of them, but I don't remember him telling his Republican Senate friends, because he was running that year. He was a political candidate for the United States Senate. So I'll let him speak to whether or not he was advocating for passage of the PACT Act. The good news is we got it done over Republican opposition. And my opponent, were he to be elected, will be another voice for those billionaire and corporate tax cuts, another Republican voice to both rig the tax code and rig the courts. Their party is the reason we have this radical right Supreme Court, and he's committed to that agenda. So I'll let him try to say otherwise, but I think it's pretty clear. If people want a radical right MAGA majority, then they should vote for him.
And then on the state of the race right now, it's been about 3 weeks since Biden dropped out. Kamala Harris, Tim Walz are at the top of the ticket. How has that changed, if at all, the momentum of your campaign on the ground in Pennsylvania?
Well, I think every candidate and every campaign has gotten a great lift. Kamala Harris has carried this campaign in 3 weeks to a place it wasn't before, and Tim Walz, I think, has just added to that. The governor now part of the ticket for less than a week, and you're seeing that same intensity and enthusiasm. What we have to do is continue that, because we still have about 85 days left. And what you're seeing on the other side is the continual attacks on both Vice President Harris and Governor Walz. Those attacks are just going to be amplified. So we have a rough road ahead, but I think we're off to a great start.
Senator Casey, you mentioned valor multiple times in your speech. How do you react to Senator J.D. Vance accusing Tim Walz of stolen valor?
Well, look, I think when someone serves, as Governor Walz did, for 24 years, I think that service should be lauded and commended, not to be denigrated. And I think in large measure, it reminds me of my own campaign, where it seems like Republicans are trying to distract from the real issues in a campaign. So they're going to bring up any issue they can, because they're having trouble making the case against Vice President Harris, and the case against, to the extent that they're trying to make it, with regard to Governor Walz. And it's not working out for them very well, because people know that basic rights are on the line in this race, whether it's voting rights and democracy, women's rights, workers' rights, and so many other issues that are important, not just to Americans more broadly, but in this case, veterans in particular. And voters know who voted with them and who voted against them. And that's why I think you're seeing a lot of distractions on the Republican side. My opponent's doing it every day of the week. He's accused me of everything imaginable. But I think that people can sift through those distractions and get to the issues they're most concerned about.
From the Democratic side of things, this is the first time there has been a veteran at the top of the ticket in about 20 years or so. What does that mean for veterans, for this country, and what does it say about the Democratic Party?
Well, I think Governor Walz can speak directly to concerns that veterans have, but also concerns that Americans have. As I mentioned, the middle class, the needs and the interests of the middle class are on the line in this race. And basic rights are on the line like never before. Never before in recent American history, at least for the last 50 years, have we had such a big debate about basic rights, voting rights, women's rights, workers' rights, and so many other rights that are on the line. So I think he's speaking directly to that, and that's why I think they're off to a good start.
Okay, I think we got one more question, Ryan. Do you have anything? Okay.
Congressman,
Thank you.
anything you want to say? Just
No, I think there's 900,000 veterans that are really proud here in Pennsylvania, 900,000 veterans that are really proud to support Bob Casey, Tim Walz, and Kamala Harris.
Patrick, thank you so much.
Can I
Appreciate
ask
it.
one more? So about the More Savings Act, right? That would
Right.
lower the cost of treatment for veterans seeking help with opioid addiction. Is that right?
Well, more savings is really about the broader everyone really
Okay.
that needs substance use disorder treatment. What we're trying to do with that legislation, it's not passed yet, but we're advocating, I think, what is a novel idea but a critically important advancement, is to say that if someone needs treatment for a substance use disorder problem, often driven by fentanyl, then we should make sure that there aren't copays and deductibles preventing them from getting that kind of treatment. Because as much as we're doing everything possible, and we have to continue to interdict or stop the flow of fentanyl at ports of entry, mostly through vehicles driven by American citizens. We've got to detect that fentanyl with the new technology. That's why David McCormack was wrong when he capitulated to his Republican presidential candidate, who said, "Don't support the border bill, the toughest, most bipartisan border deal in 25 years." He capitulated to that pressure instead of supporting a bill that would stop the flow of fentanyl. As important as it is to lower the amount of fentanyl that's coming into this country through ports of entry, we've got to make sure that we can treat folks that are already within the grip of that addiction. More savings is one way to make sure that there's a pathway to treatment that isn't thwarted by copays, deductibles, and other impediments.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Have a
everybody.
good one.
Appreciate it. Patrick, thanks so much. Someday.